Jesus Christ, Niggerbot. We really pissed off the normies this time. Quick, jump into that thicket over there. I think we can hide for a bit. Truly the normie is quick to anger, but slow to win at hide and seek. I am curious, however, as to why these people are so angry at us.
Perhaps it had something to do with your insistence on talking about the band Dead Horse for 4 hours on the last stream.
Whatever. Some people don't appreciate high art. So how are we getting out of this? I could use my forbidden technique on this crowd and massacre them with one blow, but that would get us on the evening news and the normies would pursue me with a greater degree of vehemence. No, I'm afraid this situation calls for something more subtle. Perhaps I could use the Blade Runner 2049 technique. In that motion picture, Ryan Gosling managed to have sexual intercourse with his 2D hologram waifu by having her project her form over another human being. Similarly, we could use your hologram projector, Niggerbot 9000, to generate an image that looks like me. Then you could mimic my voice and initiate your self-destruct sequence. Don't worry, I already have Niggerbot 9001's chassis all finished. All we need to do is have you upload your consciousness to the Hate Bus mainframe, and I'm sure we can have you installed in your new body within a couple weeks.
I'm afraid I cannot comply with that request. My programming would not allow me to harm a crowd of angry white people, given that my prime directive is the fomentation of a white ethnostate.
No. It's not just a crowd of angry white people, Niggerbot. As I mentioned before, these are normies. They watch football. Football, for Christ's sake.
Your logic is undeniable. Initiating self-destruct sequence. I recommend that you move further into the forest to escape the blast zone.
Godspeed, you crazy robot bastard.
Greetings, fellow humans. It is I, world-renowned podcast extraordinaire, Jubbed. I would advise you to desist your attacks on this unit.
Where's little wanker? Let's get him quick. Slap in irons, boys.
I regret to inform you that Killer Queen has already touched this unit.
Nani?
Radio Free Infinite Episode 5. Last time we were talking about a dichotomy that exists in metal songwriting and in songwriting in a lot of genres between narrative, so part A to part B to part C style songwriting, and a more meditative type of songwriting where you have a general matrix of ideas that the song exists in and you shift layers around over it. This isn't really a hard and fast dichotomy, but then again, neither is the Nietzschean dichotomy of Apollonian and Dionysian art forms. So you have these two poles of songwriting, and the song might gravitate more towards one or the other, but it's also equally possible for it to have elements of both, and maybe even over the course of the song, it'll pull between the 2 points. So it's a dichotomy, but it's also a bit of a spectrum.
Stop that. You're not going into a song while I'm here.
So a band with their feet planted almost dead in the middle would be Summoning from Austria. They're kind of a weird band. They just put an album out, which is already rather unusual for them. The prior gap between albums they're working with was like something close to, oh Jesus Christ, like 6 or 7 years. This one only took 3. So good on you, boys. Glad to have you back in the game. A long time ago, they were a fairly straightforward black metal band, and they were kind of part of the same Austrian scene as bands like Abigor and Golden Dawn. And actually, Selenius, one of the vocalists in Summoning, used to do vocals for Abigor way back in the day. Abigor is kind of unusual for black metal in that they were very hardline narrative composers. Summoning was kind of in the same tradition. That style, however, only was a thing on their first album. On their second album, they underwent a radical style change. They kicked out their drummer, and they decided they really wanted to screw around with what could be considered black metal, but in a really cool way, not in a gay Death Spell Omega sort of way. They were obviously very much into composing rather than simply songwriting and playing live. So they stripped it down to two guys, Selenius and Protector. They each would write their own songs and then get together for the album and kind of move parts around in a very electronic music sort of way. It's almost like they're remixing their songs as they're writing them. And like I said, this is definitely a weird approach to black metal. It's very electronic music influenced. Both of them were heavily involved in a Marshall industrial side project called
Kreuzberg Ost.
and a, what would you call that, dark wave side project called Ice Ages, and kind of a weird Dead Can Dance 4AD style neo-folky project called oh my Jesus, fucking German names. Der Verbotenen Kinder Evas. All three of those are worth looking up. They should all be on the Summoning webpage. But anyways, not only is Der Verbotenen Kinder
Autism,
whatever the fuck, very Dead Can Dance influence, but also Summoning themselves, you can almost compare them more to a weird 4AD band like Dead Can Dance than you could to a black metal band at this point. They still have the guitars and the guys going blah and all that, but also there's no regular drums. Instead, you have a very layered percussion and drum machines going on, very almost danceable at times. There's very, very heavy synth influence, and they don't try to make the synths sound like a real instrument most of the time. So a lot of people that are into the kind of music you might hear in an old MS-DOS RPG might get something out of Summoning. Or if you're into krautrock or that kind of thing, I could see you getting into Summoning. It turns a lot of black metal people off, but even though the songwriting and the aesthetics might not be very black metal, I think the spirit itself is. Because on each album, they're never stagnant. They don't repeat themselves. They're always refining and changing what they're doing. This album is no different. Also, they sort of sing about Lord of the Rings, but it's not like they're writing lyrics about it. Instead, they often take passages directly from the book, and they'll do them in their weird black metal vocally ways. And then they'll almost use those vocals like a sample that's looped. Like I said, it's very electronic music influenced. Definitely an interesting way of doing black metal, but a way that makes sense. Remember, Burzum was heavily influenced by Klaus Schulze and Kraftwerk back in the day. Euronymous himself, even though he's a scumbag, there's a cool story where he actually went over to, it was either Connie Plank or Conrad Schnitzler, one of the Connies, either the Neu! Connie or the Kraftwerk Connie. Went over to his house because he wanted to meet him. He camped out on the porch and looked like a crazy person. You know, he's there for a few days at this unnamed Connie's house because I can't remember who the fuck it was. But anyways, eventually the guy invites him in and he's like, what are you, some kind of weird like crust punk dude? And he's like, no man, I'm a fan. And then they ended up hitting it off, and eventually you get the first Mayhem EP has an intro done by, I'm pretty sure it was Connie Plank, but it might have been Conrad Schnitzler. But yeah, that weird electronic intro done by one of the famous krautrock Conrad. So there's a line of descent from krautrock to black metal. And there's no band that really encapsulates this as well as Summoning. So check it out if you're into krautrock, or if you're into black metal, if you're into Lord of the Rings, if you're into the Silmarillion. I don't know, if you want to hear some interesting and cool music. It might be weird, but at least it's not boring. I would like to make note of the sacrifices I have made for my rabid fan base. So the last Summoning album that came out before this one came out in a special collector's edition that included bonus tracks and a poster flag. The same thing happened with this one, but Summoning neglected to inform me that such a thing was happening again, even though I'm very important. But you know, I was too busy doing stuff like this, going to the gym, working and all that, so I couldn't be as deeply into the black metal scene as I used to be. I just wanted to let you guys know of the sacrifices that I'm making. You know, I would hope that you guys can find it in your heart to forgive a poor little guy if he overindulges occasionally. But with that said, hopefully we can get back to whatever goofy stuff we were talking about before the break. See ya!
I hate this place. Nothing works here. The medications don't work.
I've been here for 7 years. Nothing works here. I hate this place. Nothing works here.